I have mentioned the Ascended Masters in several of my videos, but I'll do some talks where I focus more on the Ascended Masters. And in this one, I'll focus on what can the Ascended Masters do for you? And the question that many people ask themselves when they first hear about Ascended Masters is, why should I even pay attention to Ascended Masters? And it's a natural question, but you noticed it contained the word should. And there is no should in whether you should pay attention to Ascended Masters or not. It's not something you should do. There is absolutely no attempt to force you into or talk you into anything. There's no attempt to scare you with dire consequences if you don't follow these teachings. There's nothing like that when it comes to Ascended Masters. And the reason is that the Ascended Masters are completely beyond Earth. They have ascended from Earth. And you ascend by becoming completely non-attached to anything on Earth. In other words, the difference between Ascended Masters and any spiritual teacher that isn't an Ascended Master is that the Masters don't need anything from you. They have ascended to the spiritual realm. They are completely self-sufficient. They receive all of the energy they can need directly from the source. They don't need any energy or any attention from Earth. So there's no should. It's simply a matter of, are you ready to consider a different kind of spiritual teacher? Most people who hear about Ascended Masters, it's not the first teaching they hear about. The vast majority of the people I have met, they have found other spiritual teachings before they heard about Ascended Masters. So the real question is, are you ready to find something that's beyond what you have found so far? Are you ready to encounter a different kind of spiritual teacher? And this is something you can't decide with the outer mind, and you especially can't know with the mind, with the intellectual, analytical mind. So I'm not going to present any arguments here that are attempting to talk you into believing anything. It's not my role whatsoever to try to make you believe in Ascended Masters. There's no argument that can be presented that says Ascended Masters exist and this is why. It's something you know intuitively. You feel it in your heart. And it's really only at the heart level you can know whether Ascended Masters is something for you. But of course, it's wise to recognize that for many of us, especially those of us who have grown up in our Western societies, there is a certain tension between the heart and the mind. Because we have been brought up to really activate the analytical, linear thinking mind and not pay so much attention to our intuition. But if you are a spiritual person, it's obviously because you have paid attention to your intuition. And it's really only your intuition that can tell you whether the Ascended Masters have something for you that you need at this particular point on your spiritual path. The way I look at it and the way the Ascended Masters present it is that we are all walking our personal path. And this, of course, started lifetimes ago for most of us. So we have been walking the spiritual path as we could see it for perhaps many lifetimes. And we may have been involved with many religious, spiritual organizations. We may have practiced many things. And often we have in this lifetime been involved with various spiritual teachings and organizations. But there comes a point where many of us, I'm not saying all people, but many of us are ready for something beyond what we have found so far. And that's often when we become aware that there is a different type of spiritual teachers than what we see on Earth. And so one way to explain what Ascended Masters is to say that they're spiritual teachers. That isn't the whole story, as I'll talk about. But it's most of us, when we first hear about Ascended Masters, we look at them as a kind of spiritual teacher. So let's look at that. Why should you pay attention to Ascended Masters? Well, as I said, you shouldn't, but why might you want to do it? Why might you feel intuitively that this has something for you? And for many people that I have met, the first reason we have for paying attention to Ascended Masters is that they give spiritual teachings. And the Ascended Masters have, if you look back throughout history, they have given many or inspired many spiritual teachings. But what has happened in the last about 100 years or so is that they have stepped forward publicly. Before that, the teachings they gave were kind of veiled, kind of hidden. During the Middle Ages, for example, when the Catholic Church persecuted anyone who was different, they gave them in more like secret societies, and it wasn't generally known to the public. But in the last 100 years, they have come out publicly, stated, we are the Ascended Masters, we exist as spiritual teachers in the spiritual realm, and we are able and willing to give spiritual teachings directly from the spiritual realm. Now, as I said, they've always been doing this. They've been doing this for thousands of years. But within the last 100 years, they have done it more publicly, saying, here we are for those who are ready to acknowledge us directly. And they have given a vast amount of teachings. I mean, a vast amount of teachings. It started in the 1930s. There has been several organizations that were sponsored by the Ascended Masters. And I have been working with the Ascended Masters as a messenger for bringing forth teachings since 2002. And there's just a vast amount of teachings out there, so much that it would take you years and years to study it all. So why should you pay attention to this? Well, first of all, because the Masters explain a lot of things that many spiritual teachings can't explain. They answer a lot of the questions we have. And there's just so much teaching that it gives you a whole different worldview, a whole different way to look at yourself, to look at the world we live in, and to look at the spiritual path. So, and as I said, there are a number of teachings given through different organizations. Obviously, I'm not here to recommend any specific one to you because I don't know what is the right thing for you. That's what you have to feel for yourself in your heart. So it's really a matter of looking at these different teachings and seeing what resonates with you at the heart level. It's obvious that I have been the instrument for bringing forth a lot of teachings myself, and so therefore they're the ones I know the best. They're the ones that resonate with me, obviously, and with my level of consciousness. So I can only speak based on that, but you need to decide for yourself, feel what is right in your heart. So basically this, the first realization that most people come to is there is a different type of spiritual teacher than the ones who are in the physical realm, embodied teachers, and they have a vast amount of teachings, and they have a higher perspective, a higher vision than most people who are in embodiment. I'm not in any way trying to talk down any specific teachers. I've myself dealt with a couple of spiritual teachers that were in embodiment before I heard about Ascended Masters. But these teachers were from India. They were from the Indian guru tradition. And I came to a point where after a few years of this, where I realized that these teachers, they were obviously well-intentioned, well-meaning, but they had a certain cultural overlay. It came from India. They looked at things based on this Indian tradition. And I started asking myself, okay, I believe in reincarnation. I have no doubt that I have been in India in past lifetimes and I have been part of this whole guru tradition. But why did I decide to embody in the West in this lifetime? Wouldn't it make sense that I need to find a type of spiritual teacher who is directly aimed at or aiming at helping people who grew up in the modern, not necessarily Western world, but the democratic world? And the interesting thing is that the Ascended Masters have this saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it has various interpretations, but one of them is that when you come to a point inside yourself, in your heart, in your intuition, where you feel you're ready for a different kind of teacher, in most cases, something will appear that points you in a new direction. Now, in some cases, there may be several things that appear at the same time, but generally, something will appear. And so what happened for me was that when I came to this point where I sort of had the inner clarity, I'm ready. I'm ready for a kind of teacher that's beyond the human level, that doesn't have any cultural bias, that doesn't have any personal baggage. And I know very well that these first two teachers that I found, the organizations they had founded, they claimed that these teachers had reached some perfect state. They were in a higher state of consciousness. But I came to realize that if you're still in physical embodiment on Earth, you do have certain, first of all, the cultural overlay based on where you came from, but you also have a certain personal idiosyncrasies. And I'm not saying this is bad or negative. I just started seeing it. And I started feeling in my mind, I want a different kind of teacher that doesn't have that. That's beyond that human level. That doesn't want anything from me, doesn't need my energy or attention, doesn't need money. And when I reached that inner clarity, I heard about Ascended Masters. I first heard about 3 different groups that claimed to be taking messages from the Ascended Masters. And after looking into them, I sorted out the 2 of them and settled on one. And so that was the teaching I followed and studied for 15, 16 years. Until I came to a point where I myself started working directly with the Ascended Masters and bringing forth more teachings, which can be found on my websites and in the books I have published. I published 80 books, many of them with teachings directly from the Ascended Masters, but there's even more material that's freely available on the websites. And the main website where you can find introductions about Ascended Masters, what they are, is called ascendedmasterresources.com. ascendedmasterresources.com. So, okay, so where does that leave you? It's a matter of tuning in to your intuition, tuning into your heart. Are you at the point where you want a different kind of teacher? Perhaps you have seen teachers in embodiment who were really not what you wanted, not what you expected from a spiritual teacher. And then you can realize that you only ascend by transcending all ego, all selfishness, all self-centeredness. So the Ascended Masters want nothing from you, need nothing from you. Not trying to manipulate you, not trying to make you loyal, and they're not trying to make you feel that you have to follow them. It's an entirely voluntary thing. They are offering you something, and it's up to you whether you feel you're ready for it. Okay, so just as an example of the many teachings that they give, what the Ascended Masters present is an entirely different worldview, that the Earth is really an educational institution for us who are in embodiment. But the Earth is not the highest form of educational institution found in the entire universe. The Masters make a distinction between natural planets and unnatural planets. And on natural planets, you don't find warfare, torture, crime. You don't find people treating each other based on this ego, selfishness, self-centeredness. But you do find this on a few unnatural planets, and Earth is obviously one of them. So this gives you a sense, or it gave me a sense that all of a sudden I had an explanation for a lot of the things I could never understand as a child. Why is there war on the Earth? Why is there all of this negativity? How could something like the Holocaust happen? How can torture happen? And all of these things. And suddenly I realized that God didn't create this. It wasn't something that just happened by accident. It's something that human beings have created over a long period of time. And I realized that the fact that I could see this, even as a child, that this couldn't be right, this couldn't be natural, shows that I'm actually here to help do something about it. But all along, I had felt, what can I, as a person, do about conditions on Earth? And I felt powerless, as most of us do. So when I heard about Ascended Masters, I realized I am not here to do something about conditions on Earth. I am here to work with the Ascended Masters, and this can make a positive contribution to changing things on Earth. I can't do it alone. I can't do it as a separate being, but in cooperation with the Ascended Masters, then I can do something. So this was another important aspect of what the Ascended Masters can do for you. They can give you the sense that you are here for a reason. They can give you a sense that things aren't the way they ideally should be, but that Earth is in a process of moving closer and closer to again becoming a natural planet, where all of these negatives aren't found. And we who are spiritual people, many of us have chosen to embody here, specifically on Earth for a long time, but also specifically at this particular time, in order to help bring the Earth forward. The Ascended Masters teach that the Earth is in a transition phase. You have probably heard about these ages, the age of Pisces, we are moving into the age of Aquarius, but the Ascended Masters also talk about we are moving into a golden age. And there's especially one master called Saint Germain, who is going to be the spiritual overseer for the next 2,000 years. And he has plans to take the Earth into a golden age, and this has already progressed somewhat. Maybe difficult to see in everyday life, but it actually is happening. And when I realized this, I got this much deeper sense of purpose. That, because I always felt, and watch yourself, watch your heart, and what this tells you, because you probably felt something similar. I always felt, I'm not here on Earth because I want to enjoy life the way it can be enjoyed on Earth. I'm not here for worldly pleasures. I'm not here for fame or fortune or money or whatever. I'm here to do something positive. And this is what the Ascended Masters gave me, and then focused my attention on what I can do to make a positive difference on Earth. And they can do the same for you. You can, the Ascended Masters teach that we all have a divine plan or a life plan. And this is a plan we create before we came into this embodiment. And we were working with the Ascended Masters, because the Masters also teach that all of us have several Ascended Masters that we are working with individually, that are close to us. And we have been working with most of these Ascended Masters for several lifetimes. So they were helping us look at our history on this planet, our various incarnations we've had, and what kind of psychological limitations we have that we still need to overcome. And so they were also looking at what is the potential we have based on what we have overcome, where we have reached on our personal path, for doing something for the Ascended Masters and doing something for the Earth to improve Earth. And so many of us have, in our divine plan, specified where we were to be born, what time we were going to be born, what kind of a family, what kind of an environment. And it had two purposes. The first one is to help us overcome the limitations in our psychology that we haven't overcome yet, so we can step up to a higher level of consciousness. And the second one was to put ourselves in a position where we can do something to improve the Earth. And there are various things we can do, which I'll talk about. So these are the two aspects of our divine plan: our personal growth, overcoming things in our psychology, and what we can do for other people, or for society, or for the Ascended Masters. So this was very important for me to, and for many other people I met, to realize that, because all of a sudden, instead of having this sense of powerlessness of what can I do, or why am I here, I suddenly saw I'm here for a specific purpose. And I didn't see this all at once in one glorious epiphany. Usually we see just a few of the next steps on our life plan, and as we take those, and we see more steps, and then we gradually move forward. But just knowing that you have this plan and starting to sense what it is, what the next steps are, can be a tremendous difference for you, give you a tremendous sense of purpose. So what can the Ascended Masters do for you? Well, first of all, give you teachings about how life works, what life really is about on a planet like Earth. Then it can give you a sense of purpose. You are here for a specific purpose. You have a divine plan that specifies both your personal growth and what you can do as a service. And then the third thing is they can give you kind of a view of the future, a process. In other words, you're not just aimlessly walking from here to there. It's not just you live in this chaotic world where everything is a matter of chance and coincidence. No, you have a plan, and you have, when I look back at my life, before I even had heard about a divine plan, I can see that many of the things that happened in my life, they were part of my divine plan. They were just, even though I didn't know about it at the time, I was just gradually moving closer and closer. And many people I have met who find Ascended Master teachings, they realize the same thing. I am exactly where I need to be today, because even though I didn't know I had a divine plan, I was actually following it. And things were actually clicking into place to bring me to the place where I am right now. And so that's a tremendous sense of purpose, but it also gives you this sense of you can look forward and see there's much more to come. You have much more growth to go through in your personal psychology, and you have a much deeper service to give. So these are kind of the main things, teachings about how life works, a sense of purpose, and a sense of direction, that you are following a path. I have given some talks about non-duality, and part of what's happening in the non-duality movement is that there are some teachers that are talking about spontaneous awakening or spontaneous enlightenment. And there are even some teachers that say that you can't do anything to bring this about. It either happens or it doesn't happen. And as I've explained in those videos, I disagree with that, because you cannot force your way into a higher state of consciousness. But you don't have to force your way into a higher state of consciousness, because the reason you are not in a higher state of consciousness now is that you have forced your way out of it. And I've explained this in many of my videos, how we, in past lifetimes, there was a point where we first descended to Earth, and we descended at a certain level of consciousness, and most of us were pulled into going below that state of consciousness. We went into the consciousness of separation, where we used the duality consciousness to create all of these subconscious selves that are based on the idea that we are separate beings. And this is what forced us out of a higher state of consciousness, instead of being connected to our higher selves and to the ascended masters. So once we resolve that psychology, those illusions behind the separate selves, dissolve the energy, then we will spontaneously go back to a higher state of consciousness. So we don't have to force our way into it, but neither do we have to sit around and wait for it to happen spontaneously, because it won't happen spontaneously. It will not happen unless you resolve in your subconscious mind what's pulling you away from a higher state of consciousness. And what the Ascended Masters are doing is they're giving you teachings, they're giving you tools for how you can accomplish that. Now, I've also explained in several of my videos that the Ascended Masters are offering us a spiritual practice. And there are many types of spiritual practices out there. You have probably been using some spiritual practice already. So I'm not saying you need to abandon whatever you've been doing if it works for you, but what the Ascended Masters offer is a very specific spiritual practice. And it's based on the recognition that everything is energy. And as I said, there came a point in past lifetimes, probably in distant past lifetimes, where we first descended to Earth. And we then, as I explained in my avatar videos, many of us as spiritual people, we were attacked by certain beings. And I explained this again in the avatar videos. So we were attacked, we were wounded, we were exposed to trauma. And this caused us to create these separate selves. And so many of us feel, for example, that we doubt whether we have a right to be on Earth. Do we really have a right to tell other people what to do, or to convince other people of this or that? And so many of us, because of this trauma, we have created these separate selves. And at the bottom of a separate self is this illusion. And came to accept an illusion. For example, I shouldn't disturb people on Earth. I should just respect their free will and let them live the way they want to live, because they don't want to listen to me anyway. It's a common one. And many others, of course. And so you have the belief. But then you go into this emotional reaction based on this belief. Because most of us, again, as I explained in the avatar videos, we came to Earth to improve things. That's why we volunteered to embody on this planet, to make things better. But now all of a sudden we're exposed to this trauma. Now we doubt that we can have any positive impact. So we have this tension in us between wanting to do something, that's the only reason we're here, and then feeling we can't. And this causes emotions. And emotions are just energy. Emotion, energy, and motion. But this energy accumulates in our subconscious minds. I've explained we have 4 levels of the mind: a purely physical level, the emotional, the mental, and the identity level. And in these 3 higher bodies, or higher levels of the mind, identity, mental, and emotional, energy can accumulate. And when we qualify energy, for example, with a feeling of fear or powerlessness, some of it accumulates in our emotional bodies. And the reason why this is important is, what did I say? The essence of spiritual growth is resolving psychology and resolving these subconscious selves. So at the bottom of a subconscious self is the belief. But it's very difficult to see the belief as long as there's all this turbulent emotional energy or even mental level energy. You just can't see the forest for the trees. You can't see through that fog of the energy. So what the Ascended Masters explain is that we need to dissolve that energy. And it's very simple. You can even look it up in wave dynamics. If you have energy as a wave, so you have a wave of energy at a certain vibration, like fear-based is a lower vibration. If you invoke light of a higher vibration and direct it into the fear-based energy, it will create an interference pattern that will raise the vibration of the fear-based energy so it can again flow up. The Ascended Masters actually explain that the reason we are conscious, the reason we are self-aware, the reason we have any ability to do anything on earth is because we are constantly receiving a stream of energy from our higher selves and from the Ascended Masters. The Ascended Masters are in the spiritual realm, which is above earth, above these 4 levels, and they are directing the energy that flows into our world. And some of that energy flows through us, through our higher selves, into our identity mind, the mental mind, the emotional mind, and then into the physical. And we are meant to have a constant figure-8 flow between us here below and the Ascended Masters above. And the way this works is simply Jesus' parable about the talents. If you remember it, there were 3 servants. Then their master was going away, and the master gave them each a different number of talents. Then he went away. When he came back, he looked at what have you done with the talents. And 2 of them had multiplied the talents, 1 of them had buried them in the ground. And the ones who had multiplied talents got more. And that's how it works with energy. The more energy we get from the Ascended Masters, the more we use this for unselfish purposes to raise the whole, the more we receive from them. So it becomes this figure-8 flow. The more we do in service to life, the more energy we receive. And I can personally attest to the fact that this works. And so what the Masters have done is they have given specific spiritual practices to help us invoke light from them, higher energy light, and then direct it into the low frequency light in our own energy fields so we can transform it. And we do this by using our voice, the spoken word, by giving, they're called decrees. It's like a verse that rhymes. And we give it with a certain power, and if you do it, you can feel the energy flowing through you. And this transforms the energy in our subconscious minds, and all of a sudden it becomes much easier to look at the belief that created a specific subconscious self. And when you see the belief, see how it limits you, see that it's an illusion, you can let go of it. You can let go of the self, and you are taking a step up on the spiritual path. So this is a very important thing that the Masters can also do for you. They can give you this spiritual practice. I have been doing this regularly since 1984, giving these decrees to invoke light from your Ascended Masters. And I can totally attest to the fact that it works. I mean, it's been more powerful for me than any other spiritual practice. I'm not saying that other spiritual practices can't be helpful. Meditation, contemplation, self-inquiry, many things can be helpful. It's not that you have to give up your current practice to practice these invocations and decrees, but it's just extremely efficient. For me, it's been beyond anything else. I was actually very reluctant to do it myself originally, because I had been into meditation, and I thought, well, sitting there quietly and meditating, I can deal with that. And now I had to speak out loud, with a powerful voice, and I just, it felt weird to me, but I decided to at least try it. And from the moment I did it, I could feel the energy flowing. I could literally feel energy flowing from the Ascended Masters into my mind. And as I've explained in other videos, within a few months, I had some rather amazing results from it, where I suddenly could look at situations from my past without the emotional pain that I had had before. And I could start falling asleep. Instead of lying awake for 2 or 3 hours, I would fall asleep within 15 minutes. So this is another thing that the Ascended Masters can do for you. And I'll talk more about that in some other videos that I'll make, but I also have some videos already where I talk about it. So where are we at now? Ascended Masters can give you teachings that can explain things that you really can't find anywhere else. And they can give you a sense of purpose with your life plan, your divine plan. They can give you a sense that you are here to do something positive for the planet, and that they can give you a clear path to follow, where you can see that you can move closer and closer to this point where you've resolved the things in your psychology that cause you suffering and pain. You feel lighter, you feel freer, you feel more at peace. And you can see that there will come a point where you can start giving the service you're here to give if you are not already doing so. But you can start, if you are doing it, you can start doing it with more clarity. And this gives you a sense of purpose. But beyond that, I mean, in a little more long term, and this took me some years for me to really achieve that, but in a more long term, you can have this sense of belonging. You are part of something. And, for me, when I was young, I was in my mid-20s when I heard about Ascended Masters, and I had been in a spiritual movement before, and it was important for me at the time to be in a spiritual movement. And so I heard about Ascended Masters. There was a specific organization that I joined, and it gave me a sense of belonging to an organization and an outer teaching, and it was important for me at the time. But there came a point where, as I continued to work with my psychology, as I continued invoking light from the Masters, where I started having more of a direct inner sense of contact with the Masters. In the beginning, you often get this sense of contact with the Masters from outside yourself. And it can be from various sources. It can be from reading. It can be from listening to a message given by the Ascended Masters, a spoken message. But over time, you develop, most people I know, you develop a certain direct inner sense of connection with the Ascended Masters. And there is really no limit to how far this connection can go. It may start just being glimpses. I remember this was back in, I think, probably 1985, probably. I was listening to a audio tape. This was back when they had cassette tapes, so it's a long time ago. There was a person who was a messenger for the Ascended Masters and who had given this dictation, as it was called, which is where the Master speaks through the messenger. The messenger is not in a trance, but it's speaking through the messenger. And I was listening to this tape, and it was from an Ascended Master called Mother Mary. And I just felt, all of a sudden, I just felt her presence there in the room with me. Beyond the tape, beyond the voice of the messenger, I felt her presence. I just felt it. And it was just as tangible as if she had been physically sitting next to me. In fact, it was in a way more tangible. And I had this, on and off, this lasted a few seconds, but I had it on and off for a number of years. And then there came a point where I started feeling it more, and I didn't need the outer stimulation anymore. I could feel it inside my own heart. And this is really what is the long-term benefit of using the Ascended Masters teachings, is that over time, you develop this personal inner connection, which can grow into a sense of oneness. And for many people, there will be especially one master. For some people, it can change. You go from one master to another for a period of time because you need to learn various things. But especially after some time, there's one master you focus on that's really close to your heart, and you develop a greater sense of oneness with that master. And this gives you, gradually, it opens you up to this recognition. And it's a recognition that can be difficult to grasp at first because you can't understand it intellectually. But if you take my video, How the World Was Created, I actually explain how the Ascended Masters created the world. And what I explain in that video is that our world, the entire universe we're in, the 4 levels, was created by the ascended masters in the level of the spiritual realm above us. And the ascended masters are not just creating something that's separate from themselves. They are creating everything out of their own beings, out of their own energy. And they're using their own minds to do this. And then after they have created the physical environment, they are sending extensions of themselves into the world to co-create the world from the inside. And those extensions are us. So it's not that we were just somehow dumped in here, in this world, and here you are on your own, do whatever you can. We started, as I've explained in several videos, we started having a sense of connection to something outside our own minds, but we lost it when we went into duality. And so we can reclaim that connection and start growing to have more and more of a connection. And this comes us to the point where it's not a matter of intellectual understanding. You just realize, you experience it. I am out of this entire hierarchy of ascended masters that goes all the way to the Creator. I'm an extension of this entire hierarchy. And all of these ascended masters, and especially this one master that's closest to you, you feel like you are a part of this, and it gives you a sense of belonging that you just can't get from anything on earth. I mean, just look at how we are on earth. We start out having a sense of belonging with our family. Hopefully, you had a family you could have a sense of belonging with. Sometimes we have it with our spouses when we start having relationships. We can have it with a spiritual movement, for example. We can have it even with a spiritual guru. We can have a sense of belonging. But ultimately, nothing on earth is going to satisfy our sense of wanting to belong somewhere, wanting to be a part of something greater. Nothing on earth is going to ultimately satisfy it. And there comes that point where you realize that the only thing that's going to satisfy it is, first of all, your oneness with your higher self, but also with the ascended masters who actually created your higher self out of their own beings. And that gives you a benefit from paying attention to ascended masters that's just beyond anything you can get on earth. But most people don't have that right away. As I said, it takes some work. You have to resolve some psychology that's blocking you from having that sense of oneness. And you have to get rid of this energy that's also pulling you away from it. But this is your natural state. So as you follow this very systematic, gradual path that the ascended masters are outlining, one thing falls away, some energy is transmuted, and you start having more and more a sense of a connection, more and more of a sense of oneness. And it can just keep growing as long as your embodiment until you reach that ultimate state of consciousness that we can reach on earth. I explained this in a video called The 144 Levels of Human Consciousness, where I explained that there are 144 levels of consciousness on earth. And when it's like when you reach a certain level, you are above the ego, the selfishness, self-centeredness, but you can still go to higher levels until you reach that final level. And at the 144th level, that's where you're ready to ascend. And this is another thing the ascended masters can give you. And it doesn't apply to everybody. It's important to understand this. So as I said, we all have a divine plan. And this was created based on looking at our history, looking at why are we on earth in the first place? What do we desire? Is there anything we desire to do on earth or experience on earth? And it's perfectly legitimate. I'm not saying that everybody should be ready to get out of here, because it's perfectly legitimate to want to have more embodiments, especially to be part of manifesting the golden age of Saint Germain. So for some people, it is in their life plan to grow in this embodiment, to serve in this embodiment, but to then come back into another embodiment to do more service. But there is a certain percentage of spiritual people where it is in their divine plan that this is going to be your last embodiment on earth, because you are going to ascend after this lifetime. And this is what Jesus did. This is what the Buddha did. There are other people throughout earth who have ascended, or throughout history who have ascended. And this is sort of the, what can we say, final exam in schoolroom earth. But it's also coming to a point where you realize that you can look at earth and there's nothing that pulls you back here. Nothing you have left undone, nothing you have to resolve in your psychology, nothing you want to do for other people on the planet, nothing you want to experience, nothing you want to achieve. And you can look at earth and say, I'm ready to move on. there's nothing here for me anymore. And then you look up to the spiritual realm and you walk through that final gate and you are an ascended being, an ascended master. And that's the possibility for some people who hear about ascended master teachings. And some people sense it right away. Some people don't sense it until after some time. But if that is what you have in your divine plan, then all of a sudden the ascended masters and their teachings take on a whole much higher meaning for you, because now you realize that Earth is a very difficult planet. It's a very dense, very dark planet, very dense collective consciousness. Ascending from Earth is not a trivial matter. It's not a hobby, you know. When you realize you have the potential to ascend, it becomes really an all-consuming quest, because you realize that everything else comes into second place compared to qualifying for your ascension. And that's where the Ascended Masters again are given a tremendous amount of teachings about the ascension, about resolving psychology. And again, the tools for invoking energy are invaluable, because you really have to transform it all in order to rise to that level. And there are many, many teachings on this. And you can find them on my website. You can find them in previous Ascended Master dispensations. And if you sense that this is something for you, then this is really a stepping up to a much higher level of, realizing what the Ascended Masters can really do for you, because they are committed to helping you ascend just like they have ascended. They ascended because they received help from other Ascended Masters, and we can do the same. They are offering that to us. So there are some Ascended Masters, after they ascend, they just move on in the spiritual realm to other planets, or they move on to other levels of service. But there are some Ascended Masters who have vowed to stay with Earth, and their main purpose for doing this, there's two main purposes. First of all, to help us ascend, and second of all, to bring about the golden age of Saint Germain. And so, if any of this resonates with you, and again, it's not up here in the head, it's not a matter of arguing for or against it. I don't have any arguments. I don't. There's no intellectual argument that ever convinced me that the Ascended Masters exist. It was all something I knew in here. I just knew, because it just was the only thing that made sense to me. And it has to be the same for you. Either you know or you don't. And if you don't know, you don't need to pay attention to Ascended Masters. You just go with whatever teaching resonates with you. But it's always wise to keep in mind that you are on a path and you have a life plan, and perhaps there comes a point where it's time to step up. And perhaps that time is right now. And that's why you found this video, and that's why you have watched this long video to the end. So again, what does your heart tell you?